What's up everybody, Matt Maran here for another weekly update. So there's all kinds of crazy news to go over here this week. Most of it is super expensive, super rare hypercar stuff, but the engineering behind some of this stuff is really awesome and exciting, and there's some really innovative and new creative stuff. So it's still definitely worth covering, and I apologize that a lot of this stuff is almost a week old here for the news. There's just so much to cover, and a lot of it was over the weekend. I just didn't have a chance to cover it until now, but there's a lot to cover here. So let's get into it. First off, Aston Martin has revealed the V12 Vantage Roadster. So this is just after they, revealed the DBR22 last week, and now we have the V12 Vantage Roadster, and I'm just so glad they decided to do this. Supposedly they had talked about not doing a Roadster version of the new V12 Vantage, but I'm so thankful that they did, because it means you get that glorious V12 in the little Vantage without the roof on. It's going to be a magical car, and it's instantly added to my lottery dream car wish list. But all the mechanicals are the same as the coupe, so you can watch my coupe coverage if you want to hear all the details on that. I'll keep it brief here since there's so much to cover this week, but it says all that except just with a soft top instead. Performance numbers aren't much compromised either, so it'll still do a 200 mile per hour top speed, and the 0 to 60 time is only 0.1 seconds slower than the coupe at 3.5 seconds now. Boo-hoo. They also didn't say any amount of extra weight as far as how much it's gained. It has, I'm sure, gained some weight, but they didn't say how much. But the other difference over the coupe will be the extra rarity here of the Roadster. So they're only building 249 of these versus 333 of the coupe. But to me, that's still a decent amount of them. At least it's more than a few dozen. It will be somewhat attainable considering how many vehicles Aston Martin sells in general. 249 is, a decent bit. So, I'm not too upset about the limited production here, but supposedly all 249 have already been sold, especially these days, because they're just going to be so collectible. And as a result, there's no pricing given for these because it doesn't matter. And so they'll be starting to arrive to their lucky owners before the end of this year. So very interesting to hear that. Bugatti's big reveal at Pebble Beach here was the Mistral, which is their final street legal variant of the Chiron, and also the last street legal car to use the W16. They will have, it, I believe in the Bully Day or whatever, that's going to be, the track only thing, but for the street, this is it for the W16, so a really big deal. As you can see, the Mistral is a roadster and is the most open-air car they've done in a long time, and Bugatti CEO said customers were begging for a convertible version of the Chiron, and so making this car was a bucket list task for the Bugatti team. It also gets the top version of the W16 from the Chiron Supersport 300, meaning 1600 horsepower from that 8-liter quad-turbo engine, all-wheel drive, 7-speed dual clutch. It has all that stuff, and it's so wild, that we got to a point where we had 4 turbos on a W16 engine, and it's so wild. And these days they bolt on a few electric motors or something, you get the same amount of power. It's just nuts. But I really, the engineering of this vehicle always blew my mind, and it especially does even still, to this day. And so it's sad to see this, very special motor go. So anyway, back to the Mistral here. It has an estimated top speed of 261 miles per hour, and Bugatti will be verifying this so that they can officially claim it as the fastest roadster in the world. I'm sure Hennessy is going to try and chase them down there, with the Venom F5 roadster they just revealed at Monterey, which I covered last week. But also, getting back to the Mistral here, they strengthened the structure to compensate for the lack of a roof. The A-pillar and B-pillar structures are totally new as well. One other new touch beyond the unique styling is that in order to keep it from getting too wide, they had to separate the air intakes for the engine and the intakes for the oil coolers, which I didn't even honestly know there were intakes for the oil coolers on the Chiron, but the oil cooler ones were left in the quarter panels where they were previously, but the engine intakes are now right above the driver and passenger, which they say provides more intake and blow-off valve sounds than past Bugattis, which, oh man, that sounds real fun to me. That's amazing, because it sounded like you could hear the wastegates pretty good in Chirons already, so to hear even more of that with the roof off, with the W16, again, this thing's going to be insane money here. I'll get to that in a second. But, if you ever win like the $1 billion, jackpot, or something, this is the car to get for that. So anyway, I'm like trying to not daydream here while reading about all this stuff. So it also gets redesigned seats, a few other touches on the inside as well. If you do like this interior though, you want to make sure that the forecast is 100% clear before you take out the Mistral, because it only comes with an emergency roof supposedly, and I'm sure that means it's not going to be very pleasant to put on, and it's going to probably not work very well, and just not be a great execution. So totally understandable though. I don't know how many things are even going to leave the garage, because they're building 99 of them, which honestly for a Bugatti is a good amount of cars. So, I'm actually impressed that they're building that many. But they're doing 99 plus one test car, so 100 technically. And they're, of course, already sold out, even though the price for these is $5 million each. So, I mean, obviously, again, it doesn't even matter. They could have made it $30 million and everyone would have still bought them. But that's still a big chunk of money. So that's impressive. But I think it'd be worth every penny if you had the money to burn, that's for sure. But yeah, I mean, it's the final street legal W16 as well, and it's a Bugatti. Obviously, no one's going to be losing money on these things. It's only going to go up in value. It's just like this, they got this perfect like scheme going where it's like everyone just buys these things automatically. They all make money off of them. And it's like everyone makes money, and the result is that there's amazing cars out on the road. So I'm not mad about it, but it's just so funny how they can just instantly buy these things, instantly make money if they want, and just get richer and richer. So anyway, but awesome to see the Mistral. That is so cool. As far as what's next for Bugatti after the Chiron here, their design director actually sat down with Autoblog for an interview and gave some interesting tidbits here. So he confirmed the new car will be a plug-in hybrid, which we already heard. There's rumors of it being an electric thing, which isn't true, and that's been dispelled many times, but will be plug-in hybrid. And the new powertrain, it will have, Mate Rimac, who now runs Bugatti, said that he could have just done some kind of new version of the Chiron, or he could have just done, a Rimac, car and just put the Bugatti badges on it. He doesn't want to do that. He wants to keep the gas engine in it and stuff. And so it also have a totally new platform, which it didn't get for the Chiron. The Chiron used some stuff from the Veyron. This is going to be a totally clean sheet thing, so they're going to have a lot more flexibility as far as how they design it, what they're able to do design-wise, and also now that you have a new engine, you don't have to build around an enormous W16 engine and the cooling for that, so I'm sure that's going to give them some flexibility as well as far as how they style it, a little more so than before. So expect something that's a bigger departure than Veyron was to Chiron, but they still did say that they still wanted to have a balance of evolutionary and revolutionary for the styling while still being instantly recognizable as a Bugatti. So I'm sure they won't screw that up, and I'm excited to see what they do. But it sounds like one of the biggest challenges will actually be the interior. So he said, and this is interesting insight, from the designer of Bugatti here. He says, when you look at today's cars, it becomes very apparent that there are screens everywhere. Where is this leading us? Yes, I think that consumers deserve to have full entertainment in their daily driver. This is the interior design trend of the automotive industry, and we don't want to question that. However, I wonder, who still has an iPhone 3? Nobody, and you probably don't want to have one anymore. It likely doesn't work. What happens to these cars when they're 20 or 30 years old? Do these screens still work? Did someone do all the updates to it? All that. And he added that Bugatti models need to sit on the lawn at Pebble Beach in 50 years and work, just like we see pre-war luxury automobiles that still work. What a disaster it would be if a Bugatti would sit there and there would only be black screens inside. We're carefully thinking about this. I'm not saying that we have the ultimate answer, but I'm saying there is something that makes precious cars and precious brands worth thinking about for the sake of future generations. And so, that's why, you look at the Chiron, for example, you had a little screen in the gauge cluster, but it basically, it didn't have any smartphone integration, really. It didn't have any of that stuff. You just had in the center tunnel, there was just a few little switches there to change stuff, and that was it. Which is really rare for a modern car to basically have no middle screen, especially a luxury vehicle, and so... But it makes sense. It's a solid thing. I wondered the same thing about my Bullet as well. It's got digital gauges, a touchscreen. Will that stuff work in 20 years? Since I'm planning on keeping my car forever as well. I don't know. I think for the cheaper stuff, you just buy new old stock, and I'll hopefully someday stock up on backup touchscreens and backup gauge clusters. And for the inevitable future when those things do die, because they're TV screens, they will eventually probably. But as far as Bugatti, I know that's not so easy to do. So I totally get their viewpoint here. So it'll be interesting to see, what they end up deciding to do as far as, keeping it modern and futuristic, but also having it be future-proofed as well. So that'll be interesting to follow. Bentley this week has revealed the McLaren Batur, which is their send-off for the W12 engine. So W16 is going away, W12 is going away. Again, Volkswagen Group's just... wiping everything out here. So it's a send-off to that engine. This is also, though, previewing their future design direction for the coming electric Bentleys, which seems like an interesting dynamic there because, it still has a large grille. It has to have cooling for a W12 still, but yet, the electric stuff it'll be previewing obviously won't need any of those cooling things. So we'll see how much this previews future, Bentleys, because I still feel like it's going to change a lot for the actual electric ones, but they claim this will kind of give you a preview. I think mostly they're talking about headlights and taillights and, body lines, things like that. The grille and things like that I think will change. But anyway, inside it looks mostly like a Continental GT, but Bentley will be offering new levels of customization for the Batur interior with things like the air vent controls, which are like organ pulls. Those will be able to be made out of titanium instead of the regular metal, or you can even get it in 3D printed 18 karat gold. I didn't know you could 3D print gold. Like, that's wild. There's also new natural fiber composites they're using. So it's essentially like carbon fiber, but it's naturally occurring instead of carbon fiber being synthetic. And so you can have that in place of carbon fiber in the usual places, you know, front lip, interior pieces, you know, rear spoiler, things like that. So that's cool. Mechanically, it gets the strongest version of the 6-liter, you know, twin turbo W12, doing 730 horsepower, 738 pound-feet of torque. It also gets all the suspension and handling goodies from the Continental GT Speed, and only 18 of these will be made, and they're all sold out, of course. They'll cost about $2 million each, so cool to see that. Koenigsegg, they had a very interesting debut here at Pebble Beach. This is the CC850. So it's an homage to the CC8S, their first production car that's celebrating its 20th anniversary. And then the 50 stands for Mr. Koenigsegg's age, who's turning 50 this year. And so a lot of it is very similar to the original with a removable roof and the signature dihedral doors. But the interior has been modernized while still retaining analog gauges. So kind of blending, you know, the retro with the modern. It runs a 5-liter twin-turbo V8 that does 1,185 horsepower and 1,022 pound-feet of torque. You can get another 200 horsepower if you put E85 in it as well, if you're looking to get more. That is, though, a little less than past Koenigsegg's, and the reason for that lower power output is that they opted for smaller turbos to provide quicker response and less lag. But it's going to be plenty fast still because this thing only weighs 3,053 pounds, giving it the same power-to-weight ratio as the 1-to-1 that Koenigsegg, you know, made whenever you're running E85, that is. But possibly the most impressive part of this thing is the transmission. So it's similar to the crazy light-speed transmission that they use in the Jesko, which you know, has 7 clutches, 9 gears. But in the Jesko, it's just a paddle shift thing, and it does most of it for you. But this transmission is able to jump from one gear to any other gear without sequentially going through them. So you can, you know, go up to a higher gear immediately or down to a lower gear without going ding, 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 ding to go down. It just immediately goes to it, which is, you know, pretty sweet. I mean, 7 clutches. How do you even engineer that? But they've done it because they're brilliant. And anyway, so, you know, it has that kind of a transmission here in the CC850, but in this, it's a manual transmission with a clutch pedal. And it's basically, it's a pretty much a real manual. So the clutch can stall out the car, and it controls all 7 clutches and the 9 gears. It's you know, pretty wild that, you know, it does have a real clutch and stuff. But interestingly, the shifter is electronic though, because there's only 6 gates, even though there's 9 gears. So basically what Koenigsegg said is having the 9 gates would have been, you know, too much, and also they think it, and I agree with them, it's much more brilliant to do what they're doing here. The cool thing is that different drive modes will also be able to change which gears of those 6 you're using. So in, you know, a track mode, you can have the 6 shortest gears. If you're doing street driving, it can swap over and then use, you know, the most fuel efficient 6 gears or some mix in between. This is like amazing, and it gives you basically the best of both worlds. You know, people who want short gearing, or you need short gearing for, you know, the fun and the excitement, but then you also need the higher gearing and the taller gearing for highway, you know, fuel economy standards and stuff. I mean, this is the perfect solution. If it was actually affordable for a normal thing, this could be like the way to have the most fun Mustang possible, because you'd have short gears, you know, whenever you want them, you know, for zipping around town, and then, you know, when you're out on the highway, you can be coasting at 1,000 RPM and get really good fuel economy still. And so, I mean, I don't know. I'm sure this stuff's crazy expensive to build, and we'll never probably see it trickle down into normal stuff for mere mortals. But that is just a super, super cool idea. And the fact they got it to work here, and I'm sure it would be an amazing experience, an amazing ownership experience, of course, as well. But, man, the creativity of Christian von Koenigsegg and his team is, it really just knows no bounds. It is very impressive. And so anyway, genius stuff. So only 50 of these will be made, and no price was revealed, but again, it's worth every penny, you know, for those lucky few. And so anyway, very cool to see that. Also, another mind-blowing car that really came out of left field, there's no teasers, there's nothing, was McLaren revealed the Solus GT, which is a track-only hypercar that was originally only a virtual car in Gran Turismo Sport, but amazingly has been brought to reality, even though it really has video game-like specs still, and it's just wild. So, possibly the craziest part of this, and I don't even know how this is real, but supposedly McLaren has engineered an entirely new engine for this car. It's a 5.2-liter naturally aspirated V10, so not twin turbo, not V8 like every other McLaren. I don't know who's paying for the R&D money for doing a brand new, very high-end engine that does 829 horsepower, 479 pound-feet of torque, and has a red line above 10,000 RPM. So we're talking, I mean, this is like the same caliber stuff as like the AMG Project 1, the AMG GT1 or whatever they call it, and, the Aston Martin, Valkyries and stuff like that. And, McLaren, I mean, they're not doing super well financially. So, I mean, it's just mind-blowing to me that they've somehow were able to justify the cost of this thing. So it runs through a 7-speed sequential manual with straight cut gears. So definitely this whole thing is very much race car, very much only track only. It only takes 2.5 seconds to do 0 to 60. Top speed is over 200 miles per hour, of course. The rest of the car is just as wild and intense as well. So the engine is actually a structural component to the car, allowing them to not need other structures or subframes, and some other parts of the structure are 3D printed titanium. I also didn't know you could 3D print titanium. Learning all kinds of new stuff this week. So that's wild. Suspension is also crazy in this thing, with a double wishbone front setup that uses inboard pushrod dampers, and then the rear suspension is mounted to the gearbox casing itself. So wild stuff. But it doesn't stop there. It also uses a 6-piston monoblock calipers for the brakes, carbon ceramic rotors, of course, which doesn't sound massive. 6 pistons these days isn't anything crazy, but the reason why it doesn't need brakes the size of a pizza is because it only weighs 2,205 pounds. Let me say that again. This thing with 829 horsepower weighs 2,205 pounds. That's like several hundred pounds lighter than a Miata. And it's that much power and this much handling and stuff. Like, this thing would be like unreal to drive, I'm sure. Like, this is mind-blowing stuff. And also the aero's wild, of course, as well. It does over 2,645 pounds of downforce. And so, I mean, I can only imagine how crazy the handling is in this thing. Only 50 of these will be built. They're all sold out, of course. That one seat for each car is going to be specifically molded for the buyer. So a little bit harder to flip these things. So you're going to have to redo the seat. There's no pricing for these, but those lucky buyers will be receiving their Solus GTs next year. But considering the engineering costs of, brand new engine, just the insane amount of R&D work that went into doing all this stuff, I mean, everything's like, it's a few $1 million. This, I feel like this has to be a few, like, tens of millions of dollars for these things. I don't know. I'm not in that world. I have no clue. But this thing has got to be beyond the usual few $1 million. It's got to be, crazy expensive to justify doing this, at McLaren. So, but man, I can't wait to see a YouTube video or something of one of these things maybe running on the track. I'm sure that is going to be mind-blowing. And man, the people that get to drive that thing, that is going to be an amazing experience if you can even handle it. I'd probably just like pass out or something. It'd be like too much. I just like go into a G thing like I'm going for a ride in a fighter jet or something. But anyway, wild stuff, and so very cool to hear that. And the mind-blowing stuff doesn't stop there. Next vehicle here, another car with wild specs that debuted at Pebble Beach, was the new Sapphire version of the Lucid Air that debuted this weekend. So it has 3 electric motors that provide over 1,200 horsepower, which is on the low end, because they, like I talked about last week in the teaser, I believe these motors are able to do up to 2,000 horsepower. It's only doing over 1,200, but apparently that's going to be plenty still for what this thing's doing. 1,200 horsepower is a lot, but I'm honestly blown away at just the performance numbers they're quoting with only 1,200 horsepower and a heavy, big electric vehicle that's luxurious as well. But here's the specs here. So 0 to 60 in less than 2 seconds, 0 to 100 miles per hour in less than 4 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, you're doing 100 miles per hour. Wild. On top of that, a sub 9-second quarter-mile time. It also do over 200 miles per hour, which is also notable for an EV, especially, I'm not sure all the specs on the Lucid. I believe they don't have more than 1 speed for a transmission, so I mean, that's going to be geared really taut. I'm not sure about that. But anyway, wild as far as that goes. And Lucid claims you can do those numbers without needing to do a bunch of battery preconditioning like the Tesla Plaid needs either. So they say you can just, do this stuff and it'll take it all day and you don't have to do any kind of special setup sequence or anything, which is also impressive that, it can do this just, on a cold battery or whatever. But they improved the handling too. It gets stiffer springs, bushings, has unique tuning for everything, along with now doing torque vectoring. It also gets carbon ceramic brakes, wider tires, which is why the Sapphire is a little wider than the regular Air. Despite these changes, though, they claim that the range will be still better than the competitors. It will be, I think, a little bit lower, but still better than competitors, which means it'll be better than a Tesla Plaid, and Taycans and stuff like that, too. Inside, it also gets new sports seats, but even though they're sports seats, they still have all the luxury features, including heating, cooling, and massage. Massage while doing 0 to 100 in 4 seconds. Man, what a wild world. It'll be limited production, of course. They didn't say how limited exactly, so who knows. But they did reveal it'll be starting to arrive to customers in 2023. And the pricing is also mind-blowing because it's so reasonable. So, 0 to 60 less than 2 seconds, outrunning all these other hypercars and insane otherworldly cars. And anyway, this thing only costs $249,000, which I think is, more than a Plaid still. But regardless, still 250 grand, and you're going to be blowing the doors off of basically everything. So, at least up to 200 miles per hour. And then after that, maybe some of the other stuff will leave you, like the Bugatti and stuff. But still, wild. And so, yeah, I think that's the best bargain of Pebble Beach there. Get one of those things for 250 grand. Wild. So cool to see that. Speaking of wild pricing, though, on the other end of the spectrum here, if you're curious to hear how much that Sally edition of the Porsche 911 went for that I talked about last week, it's an homage to the vehicle from Cars, the Pixar movie. It's a really cool story, and it's awesome. It's all for charity. They collaborated, Pixar and Porsche, on it, and you can watch that in last week's video. But anyway, if you're curious how much that went for, the final selling price was $3.6 million for a Porsche that, without being a one-of-one special thing like this would typically be like 140 grand tops. The charity components certainly did help for sure. It's just still wild. The one-of-one factor, all the Pixar stuff, certainly drove up the price, I'm sure. And supposedly whoever bought it just bought it over the phone. So it wasn't even the normal Monterey crowd. It was someone who really wanted this thing, phoned it in, and ended up paying $3.6 million for a 911 GTS with some special stuff on it, which, again, it's a special car. And more power to that person for paying that much, especially for charity. But they also, because of that, though, this has set the record for the most expensive new Porsche ever sold at auction. So crazy stuff, but awesome that's going to a great cause, and just a nice end to that whole story of the Sally edition of the Porsche 911. Another record breaker here that was at Pebble Beach was the Lamborghini Urus Performante. So Urus Performante here, it's kind of surprising they're actually using the Performante badging, but I guess it's better than Superleggera because there's nothing light about this, even though it did lose some weight. But going for the Performante is a better choice. And so, like I mentioned 2 weeks ago, this new Urus Performante broke the SUV time record for Pikes Peak's hill climb by almost 18 seconds for, again, the SUV record. And it gets a bump in horsepower to 657 horsepower from the twin-turbo V8, 627 pound-feet of torque. This drops the 0 to 62 time by 0.3 seconds, now doing a 3.3 second 0 to 62 time. Beyond that, it uses more carbon fiber, along with getting a titanium exhaust, a new fixed spring suspension to replace the air suspension that Urus normally get. And all this helps to drop the vehicle's weight by 104 pounds, which is pretty significant. It still does have adaptive dampers and four-wheel steering, torque vectoring, all that kind of stuff, so still a very advanced setup, even without the air suspension. It also now gets a rally driving mode that's been added for those who are brave enough to not only take the Urus on dirt, but also to just slide it around and get, who knows how many rock chips all over it as well. So, but I'm sure there will be some people that do, and awesome that, they're going to have that capability. Otherwise, it gets new bumpers, hood, a rear wing, along with wider fenders to accommodate the wider wheels and tires. It's not just for looks either, with downforce improving by 8%, and amazingly, drag has been decreased as well, even though with the extra aero. And so they'll be starting to arrive before the end of the year, and prices start at $260,676. So cool to see that. Lincoln has revealed the Model L100 concept at Pebble Beach to celebrate their 100th birthday, and obviously it's very far out, concept, not very realistic, but they say it reimagines what the Lincoln Sanctuary might look like for our clients of tomorrow. It's pretty wild, being longer than a Navigator while still being a a two-door coupe here. It's awesome though to see Lincoln making a coupe, even if it is, you know, a far out concept. And the doors are massive. They actually slide backwards before opening up in a coach fashion to reveal the luxurious and futuristic interior, which lacks most controls, since hypothetically something like this would be autonomous in, you know, these futuristic, you know, times that Lincoln's imagining. And Lincoln says it uses next-gen solid-state battery tech and motor in-wheel setups to maximize interior space, which are two things that I'm sure they probably actually are working on. Maybe not for super soon, but, you know, we do know that a lot of these companies are working on solid-state batteries and stuff. I'm not sure if this one actually is running it, but I think it's just the, you know, ideal setup here, you know, for this thing in the future. And so, anyway, a very cool, very beautiful concept for sure. And, you know, we could see some, you know, of these lighting elements, like the, you know, U-shaped LED there in the front, you know, that could potentially work its way onto future Lincolns or something. We'll have to see. But anyway, very cool to see that. DeLorean has shown off 3 vehicles at Pebble Beach. The first is the Alpha 5, which they already showed off a couple months ago, and I already covered that. There's still not a ton of mechanical details, so I'm going to kind of gloss over that one here. But in case you missed it, it's an electric coupe with huge glowing doors, a few nods to the DMC-12, but in my opinion, it's still just a massive disappointment because all they had to do was make a modern DeLorean, and instead they try to do something else and try and make it into this big, huge new electric car startup company like everyone else is doing these days. And instead, a Hyundai Ioniq 5 looks more like a DeLorean than a DeLorean looks like a DeLorean. So that's my take on it. But anyway, it'll supposed to be doing 300 miles of range and a 0 to 60 under 3 seconds. One of the new things that they brought to Pebble Beach was the Alpha 5 Plasma Tail, which is a shooting brake version essentially, but otherwise seems to be the same. It looks cool though, and we'll see if any of these can make it to production. The other one is a really far-fetched and almost certainly won't make a production concept here that's called the Omega, and it's supposed to be a complete departure from traditional automotive design, as you can see. It's designed for hypothetically tackling the Baja deserts in 2040 is what they're envisioning here. So definitely looks, you know, very cool though. There's no doubt about that. And so we'll see how much of this stuff's vaporware, or, you know, how much of this actually does come to production and, you know, stick around. You know, we'll have to wait and see. But anyway, very interesting to hear all that anyway. And the last few debuts here for Pebble Beach are a little more attainable and are actual production vehicles. You know, so it's a little bit more back to reality here. So one is that Kia has shown off the EV6 GT, which we've already seen. We already know the specs on the EV6 GT. I feel like it's been taking forever for them to roll this thing out for some reason. But anyway, you know, we've already, you know, seen all this stuff. I'll go over some of the stuff briefly here. But what they're showing here is the US version, and they've announced it will have a drift mode that apparently must be basically a rear-wheel drive mode, because that is a real smoky drift for just a drift mode and on an all-wheel drive thing. I mean, that's a lot of smoke. So I feel like this has got to be mostly rear-wheel drive in that mode. Looks awesome doing it though, and the specs have been updated a little bit. So instead of, I believe it used to have a 3.5 seconds 0 to 60, that's now been lowered to 3.4 seconds. 576 horsepower still. To slow it all down, there's 4-piston front calipers on 15-inch rotors, hiding behind unique 21-inch wheels, and even the rear rotors are 14.2 inches. So still a very significant size there. It also gets an adaptive suspension, quicker steering ratio, and chassis reinforcements. It also has a top speed of 161 miles per hour, which is also, again, notable for a single-speed transmission electric vehicle to be geared that tall and still be doing 3.4 seconds 0 to 60s is very impressive, you know, for an EV. So also inside, it gets unique seats and trim, and it'll be arriving at dealers before the end of this year, but we still don't have pricing for it yet either. So that's one of the other, you know, big mysteries here, but at least we know it is now coming, you know, before the end of this year, so we have a kind of a goal here. And I mean, this is going to be a big sleeper too, because I mean, it looks a little bit different than a regular EV6, but I mean, no one is going to suspect this thing is this fast, that it's basically going to keep up with all those supercars and, you know, a lot of the hypercars and stuff too, and that it'll most likely, you know, be pretty affordable. I'm guessing, you know, maybe something around 60 grand, at least to start. We'll see, but I mean, wild performance for, you know, what will be very reasonable money, I think. So very exciting to see that. Kia has also given us an official look at the production version of the EV9 prototype. And so in typical Kia fashion, it looks impressively a lot like the concept. Kia is one of the few companies where their concepts actually do translate to production vehicles that look almost as cool. And so, you know, still has the same bold and boxy styling. Unfortunately, we don't get an official look at the back end yet, but other spy shots have shown that it will also stay very true to the concept. Kia says it'll be revealed in the first quarter of 2023. EV3, which is an impressively quick turnaround as well, because I believe we just saw the EV9 for the first time towards the beginning of this year, or maybe the very end of last year, I don't remember, but it was not long ago. And then basically, a year, maybe 2 years tops later, we already have the production version here. So very, very impressive, and so cool to see that. The last news from Pebble Beach here is that in addition to Acura bringing the Precision EV concept, which I talked about last week, a couple days later, Acura revealed another little surprise here, that they're bringing back the ZDX name for what will likely be the production version of that Precision EV concept. So it'll be their version of the GM Ultium platform-based crossover that Honda is going to be using first in their first SUV. The Prologue is going to be their first, electric SUV here, the first electric thing for the States for Honda, since we don't get the awesome little Honda E that Europe gets. So anyway, they say it'll be arriving for this Acura in 2024, and as you can see there, it'll be getting a Type S version as well. So first electric Type S, and if it gets the Blaze or SS, that's set up, from the Ultium platform, that's 557 horsepower. That would easily make it the fastest Type S ever made, aside from maybe the NSX, but it might even give the NSX Type S a run for its money, with that kind of power. So it'll be interesting to see, how they do this, and it's also interesting that they're bringing back the ZDX name, since it wasn't a very popular vehicle at all. It's probably been 10 years since I've even seen a ZDX. So, I feel like very few people bought them, and then they didn't last on the road very long either whenever they did show up. But, yes, that's what they're doing. I think it's a cooler name if we're going to use, jumbled up letters as names. I think ZDX, is a better one than, some of the other ones they could have potentially done. So, I'm excited to see how they, do this and, what they end up doing as far as the setup and stuff. But let me know what you think about the ZDX name making a comeback. Other stuff here. So moving on from Pebble Beach, Dodge has revealed the first of their 7 special editions that they announced last week. They'll be doing here for the Challenger and Charger for their last call series here of the last model year for this current generation Challenger and Charger. And so this first one is called the Challenger Shakedown. And so it's inspired by the 2016 SEMA show car build. It basically gives you an RT Scat Pack with a shaker hood, stripes, black wheels, and a red and black Alcantara interior. They'll be doing 500 of the regular body style and 500 of the wide body Scat Packs, and they'll be available to order this fall. There's no pricing for those yet. Ford has also revealed the winner for the naming contest they had held for a new name for their black accent package for the Mustang for the final 2023 model year of the current generation Mustang 2, which seems strange to switch it up now. And I think they said they're actually going to be showing this off at the Detroit Auto Show at the same time that they're also revealing the 2024 Mustang. Like, who's going to care about a black accent package when you have the brand new next generation Mustang that's also going to be revealed as well? But they're going to be showing it off there, and but anyway, so the name that they finally landed on here is Nite Pony. Which is a bit of a surprise because Ford also trademarked Dark Horse. Unless they plan to use that for something else, Dark Horse is a way cooler name, in my opinion, for a black accent package. Again, let me know what you think about Nite Pony instead. I don't know. Maybe they couldn't clear it through legal or something because of other, Dark Horse applications and songs and all that stuff. I don't know, but so anyway, Nite Pony is what they're ending up with here. So the black accent package will be available for the two-door Mustang and also for the Mach-E, which is the first time the Mach-E has been offered with a blackout package, which I think actually makes it look pretty cool to have everything blacked out there in the Mach-E. And so anyway, interesting to hear that. And lastly, this week, California has finalized their vehicle emissions plan they're going to be putting into action here, and I believe these mandates are going to be starting to kick in here relatively soon. And so just to reiterate some of it, I've talked about this, it was a good while back, but they're basically going to have a mandate, so they're banning the sale of new gas and diesel powered cars in California by 2035. Again, new gas stuff by 2035, still 12 and a half years away, but also will gradually increase that number with the mandate, so it's not going everything or nothing by 2035, so it's slowly ramping up here. So the mandate is 35% of new vehicle sales have to be vehicles without greenhouse gas emissions, which also does leave the door open for hydrogen stuff or anything else that just doesn't have emissions, so that'll be interesting. But anyway, so I believe that 35% is coming into effect here, I believe around 2026, I read. Then that percentage goes up to 68% have to be electric vehicles as far as new car sales in California by 2030. So 68% is over half will be electric already just by 2030. So this is going to be happening sooner than just being like, oh, 12 and a half years off. You know, it's going to slowly ramp up here, but it's not going to be 100% until that 2035 deadline. And so even though it is also just California, there are lots of states that use the CARB rules, and California's Air Resources Board. So there's 12 other states that use these CARB standards that are likely going to be implementing similar mandates soon, with another 5 states likely adopting similar mandates in the next year or so. So we're talking, 17, 18 states or so here that will be banning gas stuff and also really pushing more and more electric stuff throughout the years here leading up to 2035. So thankfully, as of right now, there is no rules against used stuff. And I think it'll be a long time before that happens because, again, the used stuff really goes back to affordability. And, that's something you're going to have to make sure you keep that affordability intact, at least for a good long while. Again, 12 and a half years is still a long ways off. And again, that's still only new stuff. So, it's still crazy to see that line in the sand being drawn, but, again, we can still enjoy our used stuff for a long time. I believe the EU is kicking around some type of later date for a full-out ban on used stuff, at least as far as buying used stuff. I would hope that stuff you have already purchased, would still be able to be registered and driven and stuff, but I think that would be like 2050 or something anyway, so a long ways off. 2035 is even a long ways off, like I often say. A lot can change in 12 years. 12 years ago, we're starting to get iPhones, and now look where we're at, so things can change a lot. I mean, 12 years ago, we basically had just gotten Facebook, and look at how much that's changed the world. So, a lot can change, the next 13 years or so here, but that is going to be the mandate. Those are the rules that are happening. And but at least we have a long time still to buy awesome gas burning new stuff, and then a long time even beyond that to continue to buy all these awesome used cars that we've been spoiled with here for decades and decades. So trying to find the silver lining there and that for all of us enthusiasts. And lastly, I want to give a huge thank you to all of you that are members of the Matt Moran Motoring Club. We didn't have any new members join this week, but I did want to give a huge thank you to Daniel Sherrill for being a member this week. I hope you're enjoying the perks still, Daniel. I hope everyone's enjoying the perks, and I really appreciate the support from all of you members. It really means a lot to me. And so yeah, if you'd like to become a member, there's links here in the description. There's also a join button here on the video page and on the channel page if you'd like to check out the perks. The support is always appreciated. And so anyway, that's it as far as all the news this week, guys. So let me know your thoughts on all this stuff in the comments below. Thank you all very much for watching. I'll see you on the next one. Take care.